Hello and welcome to the Crypto Club and Digital Assets Weekly Catch-up on Zoom. It is Sunday, the 18th of February 2024. We run these sessions every Sunday evening, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. UK time, open to everybody, novice and expert alike. Typically, we talk about blockchain, DeFi, NFTs, ICOs, STOs, the metaverse, central bank digital currencies, a whole load of other stuff, really. Everyone's welcome to join in these sessions, novice and expert alike. We never know quite what we're going to be talking about. Don't forget to click on the like, the subscribe, make comments below as well. And also come along to a future session. Details are in the link below where it says how you can come along to future events. Anyway, with that, let's see who's going to come and join us today.
I'm a smart contract developer, full stack developer. I've been, my history is, my working history is technical. I've done everything in IT or computing.
Okay.
Including database administrator, big data, managed data centers. And since 2020, I decided to change my career into Web3. So I started coding, and I've been coding ever since, really.
Nice. And what are you doing smart contracts? Is that what on Ethereum or another blockchain?
Yeah, so I code on the EVM, and I'm really excited about the Monad blockchain coming up. Not sure if you guys heard about it.
No, tell us more.
Yeah, so Monad is sort of like the I guess the Solana of the EVM. So Solana uses so the EVM Ethereum. How the big difference is that Ethereum, the reason why it's slow is because it writes data synchronously. So it only accesses the state, one state at a time and one transaction at a time. So what Solana did parallel processing. So it accesses multiple states simultaneously. So it's really, really fast. But Solana, the nodes for Solana are quite chunky. So it's not very scalable to decentralization, So like it'll take a lot of computing power for someone to run a node in Solana. Whereas that Ethereum, what they're trying to do is have the Ethereum nodes smaller and more manageable, that anybody could run a node. So it makes it more decentralized. So what Monad is doing, so in Solana, they use the Rust programming language to write their smart contracts, because Rust is really low level, and you can access the hardware quite easy, with Rust, but it's very difficult for developers to get up to speed with Rust, and write an application. Rust takes a lot of knowledge and a lot of skill. So what Monad is doing, Monad is taking the parallelism that Solana introduced, and applying it to the EVM. So they're not in testnet, they're not even in testnet just yet. Well, they're in private testnet, so there's no public testnet, and they may go, and so public testnet will probably be summer this year, and then the roadmap for going live is late 2024 Q4. So that's kind of like what's keeping me interested and top of agenda at the moment. But and in the meantime, just kind of like looking for work, really. So yeah.
Okay. I just pulled up on screen now the thing about Monad. And it says like a parallelized performance and that. So for anyone who's interested, check out monad.xyz. I'll use the English pronunciation there. It looks really interesting. It's a layer one type solution, isn't it? Or it's based around layer one, which is one of the things that always frustrates me when people keep coming up with layer two solutions to solve more fundamental things, and thereby go away from the basic principles of blockchain solutions. So that's good. That's really interesting, Kaz. Thanks for sharing that. So how you find, because Solana, you mentioned that they had an outage last week, didn't they? Didn't they? The whole network grind to a halt for a while.
That's not uncommon for Solana, is it? Really?
I'll admit I don't follow that one very particularly closely, Well, I did see on various forums now it was kicking up about how it had a halt in somewhere and they weren't processing anything. So interesting. Sorry,
Yeah,
Peter.
so I'm not really big into the Solana ecosystem, but you do see the headlines, don't you?
Mm,
And the thing with Solana is that with the Phantom wallet, apparently I never used it. It's really easy to use, and their transaction fees are really really tiny. They're small, so it's like a cent or sub-cent transaction fees and stuff like that. That's because their nodes are quite quite chunky and quite centralized, so they're able to process large amounts of data really quickly. But I think Solana, their founder, what's his name? Not Sergey, Nikolai or something, I think his name is. I can't remember, can't forget. But so he kind of like came from doing like IT systems supporting and creating IT systems for Wall Street and high frequency trading.
okay.
So he's kind of like positioned in Solana to target that market, Wall Street and high frequency trading and stuff like that. So I don't think decentralization and is kind of big on his agenda, but
Okay.
so it's a different different systems for different applications, right?
And I guess that's the thing as well. Well, when you look at different blockchains and what they offer, they don't necessarily offer what's needed for all use cases. So, as you say, for trading systems, it's the performance and the resilience that matter. The fact it's decentralized is almost antithesis, really, in some ways.
Mm,
I used to work in commodities trading, and again, low latency systems is absolutely critical and paramount, and
hmm
resilience and reliability is critical, because if you're trading like oil contracts where microseconds these days can make a difference, then the fact that the network is spread all over the place doesn't come into the conversation.
hmm
Whereas if you're doing something where you're developing a platform which is targeted at like censorship resistance or privacy or whatever, then you're generally okay to accept a performance hit in return for that kind of thing. So yeah, it's certainly interesting the way different things are designed different ways. And I think it's good as well, because you get that kind of diversity where Ethereum up till now has been known as like the community developed, supported platform that is continuing to grow and grow. Solana was trying to go, if I remember correctly, more around high performance. And then
hmm
you've got Cardano, which seems to be trying to cross both in some ways. So it's interesting to see where Charles Hoskinson's going with Cardano, because that seems to be trying to hit both areas in some way. So we'll see where it comes out. I find it fascinating because I still think that the whole blockchain, distributed ledger, and crypto space is still pretty immature compared to other technologies and adoption and that. So I think there's so much potential, and we'll see where it goes. Because is your interest primarily around like the smart contract and the developer side of things of blockchains, or do you take an interest in the whole DeFi space? Because you mentioned Web3 before, which is kind of pivotal on this stuff.
Well, it'd be interesting to, well, it'd be good for me to understand what what this meetup is about, and normally what's your agendas and
Yeah. So
special interests and stuff.
yeah, so I consciously avoid having an agenda, which has put some people off, because some people like the structure of that they want to know specific things. But I just open the session up, and we end up talking about whatever. So some weeks we might have a really deep conversation around tokenization of real world assets. I think
Oh
we
yeah.
went into that in some depth a couple of weeks ago. I think Peace was on the call for that. Other weeks we might end up talking about central bank digital currencies, which technically speaking aren't cryptocurrencies, but they behave with some similar features, and the whole programmability of payments and that kind of thing. Some weeks we might talk specifically around cryptocurrencies, and we'll have chat about Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple or rather XRP. That's kind of so really go with the flow. It depends what you want to talk about. Which does leave it somewhat open, which is why some people enjoy it. So this is why we record these sessions as well. And I get quite a few views on YouTube afterwards of people who say, "Well, I couldn't join your call, but I thought I'd watch the recording, and it was really interesting because you did some fascinating stuff." So my personal interest, I've been in this space since about 2014, 2015. My primary interest was around blockchain distributed ledger technology. So I actually avoided crypto for about 2 years, I think. I was more interested in what you could do with distributed ledgers, how you could have like provenance of goods, supply chain, digital identity, programmability, all that kind of thing. And so I had no real interest in the crypto side of things. But then eventually you end up in it and you get into, you buy some tokens or some Bitcoin or whatever. Then you start thinking about how you secure it and how does a wallet work. And that's where you discover it's not actually quite as how you thought it was, and how people have got these crypto wallets and they think that's where their crypto is, but it isn't. It's actually where the keys are. And I take an interest from that side of things. So I'm just open to all of it. It's all fascinating. I don't know. We've got Gabriella. You've got an interest in the Web3 side of things, haven't you? Wasn't that what one area you taking an interest in for a while? Gabriella sometimes just goes on mute and then stays quiet.
No, I'm here. No, I'm interested in Web3, of course. Yes.
Yeah, Gabriella comes along each week and listens intently, and I'm sure she learns lots, which is great. Let's go on, Peter. Then, anything of interest for you at the moment?
I'm just watching the space. I'm particularly interested in geopolitics, what's happening in the world, and how it relates to some of this stuff. And as we say, real world assets and the new financial system, and how this is fitting in with the BRICS, with tokenization. And we heard about real estate a couple of weeks ago. And then you're looking at that, and I saw something that it was talking about BlackRock and saying they are looking at putting more and more assets, tokenizing, putting them in. Because, Gary, the money that there is, the M1 and M2, the real money, and then the fictional money out there, derivatives and everything else, which is commodities trading, all the rest. There's quadrillions, not trillions, quadrillions of money around there. And as we said, it's all debt backed, it's fiat. You write a mortgage application, and then that creates money out of thin air. So there's all this money in existence. And then, as you know, when we get a depression or recession, that money contracts, and then the work dries up. There's no funding, shortage of liquidity. And listening about BlackRock, they're looking at tokenizing all sorts of things. And I thought, well, actually, I've got a house full of stuff here, and it doesn't appear in a ledger anywhere. You can tokenize it all and say, well, that's my wealth. And that kind of inflates the asset-backed money up towards the fiat debt-based money, I think. That might be what they're looking at, because as I think is going to happen now, the BRICS currency is breaking away, different financial system. Russia's already off SWIFT. China's got its own system. They're trading through now, like Saudi swapped its contract over. It was going to build 4 new nuclear reactors through Jacobs, and I was the man in the frame for it. Now China's doing them, and they're doing infrastructure for oil. It's almost back as barter, but as you said the other week, Gary, it's basically money is just keeping the numbers. It's just a tally. It's worthless fiat, but it's a way of reckoning things. So somewhere in between, they've done an arbitrage of what's oil worth, what are the reactors worth. It was about 40 billion. So that might be to circumvent actually selling the oil not in a petrodollar and incurring the wrath of the Pentagon while they've got aircraft carriers and missiles flying around out there, and they're talking about bombing the Iranian oil fields. So I'm watching that space and thinking, when they do this, we've got some somebody was talking about Ripple and XRP and the real world applications. And I think it was Buterin who said, "Oh, is Ether money?" And he said, "No, that's XRP. This is this stuff. This is smart contracts. Smart contracts come into play." And you came up with a nice phrase, which I wrote down and put a little box and a star around it, Gary, which said, "Programmable payments is good. Programmable money is bad."
Mm-hmm.
And that's it now, where it's been pushing for the CBDCs and there's a kickback. I think there's something happened in the American Senate, I think it was in the Senate, where there's a motion to say we can't have CBDCs, which is exactly in opposition to what the WEF was doing, where they want to do all this programmable money so they can control everything, stop bank runs, dial in negative interest rates if they want to make you spend more. So it's a wet dream for a totalitarian government. And for us, it's basically digital enslavement. So I'm just watching how this unfolds and seeing where the opportunities are and where the markets are going. But
it's interesting as well. You mentioned about like real world assets and tokenization and that. And Elena's joined us. So hi, Elena. Elena, kind of, I would consider almost an expert at the intersection of those now, because she's got an interest in the metaverse.
Yeah.
And the metaverse, which in some situations becomes a digital representation of a physical world, and you start linking it in things like digital twins, building information management, and having a digital representation of physical things. I think this is where it gets interesting. So, Kaz, as you can see, we end up going all over the place with some of these things because they start connecting to each other. So that the whole idea of, cryptocurrency extending to be programmable in some way, extending, as you say, like smart contracts, then growing into being digital representation of real world assets. Then you've got the metaverse, which operates on that boundary. I find that just the whole space fascinating. I don't know, Elena, have you got any new and interesting insights as you continue your delving into metaverses? Which I will say, like blockchain, there is more than one of them.
Yeah, continuing to delving, at full speed. One of the new, we just started the next semester. And one of the new modules we are going to study is the open web architecture and digital assets.
Wow.
So I'm looking forward to this, especially the digital assets bit. And I'm really hoping the open web architecture is not going to be too technical.
Well, I suspect because you've been on many of the calls, and particularly when we had the likes of Anthony Abel with TPX, and he talks of real world assets is one of his passions, as Peter, I'm sure, will subscribe to. Elena, I don't think you'll be listening to the courses. I think you're at the point where you'll be teaching them because you'll know enough.
Yeah.
Definitely. So
I would rather listen first anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's fair. It's like Gabriella. I know Gabriella's building her knowledge on these things as well. But often she'll stay quiet and just listen and consume these things. So, Gaz, hopefully that gives you kind of a feeling that we cover all sorts of things. And as Peter says, you start looking at the overlap with geopolitics and economies and the whole thing. And, obviously the growth of the BRICS, so Brazil, Russia, India, China, and that's recently extended to include, is it Saudi Arabia? And I'm trying to remember the other countries now. There's a South American one, isn't there? Is it Argentina or Brazil?
Argentina was going in, and then they got the new, where did this guy come from, president? Whether that was a fix, but Argentina was supposed to come in. But Saudi came in, Iran came in, Egypt came in, and Abu Dhabi and Ethiopia.
So Ethiopia, yeah. So
why is Ethiopia in there? It's got a lot of resources, and it's a big. You think of Ethiopia. I think of Ethiopia as being a poor country. We always saw the famines, but the reason there's always war and famine there is because they're fighting over all the resources. And as I said, if you look at where everything's kicking off now in Israel, all of those countries around it just came into BRICS. So the warships have moved in. Now China's put its warships into the Red Sea. Russia's put ships into the Red Sea. And if this kicks off, this is going to be big. All those oil fields are going to go up because now BRICS control 80-90% of all the oil exports. So the petrodollar's gone.
I was going to say, it's interesting as well. This is where it starts linking into crypto prices and that kind of thing, because whenever you've got volatility and uncertainty, you've always got people are looking to put their money somewhere safe, in inverted commas. Yeah. And the real world right now is not a very safe place. And so the Red Sea, and I know from the insurance industry that a lot of ships are now rerouting to not go through the Red Sea to travel around, which means freight costs are rocketing up, which means whilst we're seeing inflation at the moment, it's nothing compared to what we're going to get in the next 12 months. Yeah. If you're having to reroute all of your shipping around the world to travel an extra several thousand miles and go around South Africa and this kind of thing, that's going to put the cost of goods up, which is going to increase the price of products at the till, which is going to increase inflation. And we're living in ever increasingly interesting times, definitely. And that's why crypto, people are taking an interest at the moment, because that might act as kind of a safe harbor or a hedge against a lot of this fiat-based problems, that kind of thing. We'll see.
Yeah, when you talk about that, Gary, in terms of the inflation, and they're talking about bringing inflation back to 2%, and speaking to Tony offline about inflation modeling, because I've just remortgaged, and I was trying to lock in for longer. So rates are going to come down. Well, before the election, they're going to come down, but then there's like 40 countries having elections. After the election's over, it's going to rip one way or another, because we've still got huge amounts of printed money in the system, which has got to wash through into reducing the value of money. You talked about closure of certain routes, supply chain, which was blamed this time around for inflation. Then you've got, if Trump gets back in, tariffs again on China, basically trying to produce things at home is going to push up American prices. And then if they start firing missiles around, all those oil fields will go up. It won't stop at Iran. It'll all go up. So then what, you've got really high fuel prices, high transport costs, breakdown of supply chain. It's, I've got a garage full of boxes full of food and stuff in there and all kinds of things, and a safe full of gold and silver. It's, we've not seen times like this in our lifetime, Gary.
Well, it is funny because when I used to hold meetings in person where we talk about crypto and that, and you'd always get the conversation about, what would you recommend to invest in? And so first of all, I say, I never offer financial or investment advice or whatever. But typically people are saying, should I get into Bitcoin? Should I get into Ethereum? Should I get into gold, property? And I always used to say, if I'm reading what's going on right, you should be investing in non-perishable goods, bottled water, and ways of defending yourself, because it's going to get very exciting. Hopefully I'm wrong. So that's not financial, legal, or prepper advice, definitely. So,
how do you propose we defend ourselves in England? I'm not sure if if anybody else is in England, but guns are banned here. It seems like Pete's got like an arsenal.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So you're right, and it's interesting. I was actually having this conversation today that a few years ago, I was over in New York, and I got myself along to a crypto event that was being held in a lawyer's office. So it was just a meetup event in New York where they were talking about crypto. And the thing that I found fascinating was that the conversation that they were having there, and admittedly this was like just before COVID, was all about what we're talking about now: the worldwide uncertainty, economic difficulties, recession, depression, rioting on the streets, all this kind of thing. Well, I said, well, that's interesting because the UK is having exactly the same conversations as that in the crypto events I was going to in London. So the only difference is that in the States, you've got guns. So it was kind of interesting. And it feels as though we've not moved on from that. We've just got even more of it. That you're right, thinking about how you defend yourself. It depends what you're defending yourself against and against whom. So I've got no idea on that whatsoever. I just think that there's a point at which you just turn the TV set off, you stop watching social media, and you just get on with enjoying your life. And don't worry.
I think so. I think enjoying the moment and enjoying every day as it is now, I think is important. You know, I don't want to be, you know, there's a lot of darkness that we're discussing here. I know in my lifetime, I've never seen like a great war or anything like that. And we have been living in relative safety.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like uncommon for humankind to be, you know, to be living in this relative safety, and not face any hardships or anything like that. Yeah, it's interesting.
I'm trying to think how we bring it back towards the crypto conversation, really.
Go
on, Peter.
Because I've written a link down here. Well, there's two. The Web 3 would be part of it. But what they're talking about now is, you know, there might have been a disease X and another lockdown. They're thinking that probably won't wash, and people are trying to defund the WHO, but they're saying it's going to be a cyber attack. And what will get it, of course, is the banks, I'm pretty sure. And then maybe that's the reset of the financial system, according to some people. But what you want to do is, you know, in London, they transfer data center east and west. Probably know, Gary, all the systems there, remote. So when we had the IRA attacks in London and the Baltic Towers, and all the systems went out, and they went from being robust to resilient. Yeah, which is basically distributed. So what we're talking about now is with let's call it money, is if it's crypto and it's distributed, it's a ledger. I mean, you might say it's on your cold wallet. It isn't. The key is on your cold wallet. The file is out there on many nodes and many copies. So it's, if anything happened, your pound notes might disappear out the bank, but your Bitcoin wouldn't. Yeah.
And that's where it gets interesting. It's funny, I was doing a session with a group of insurers recently, and we're talking about cold wallets or hard wallets. So like Ledger Nano, all these kind of things, or Trezors and that. I was saying how it is that is an insurable item. However, it only provides you with access to crypto. It does not hold your crypto. And this whole thing that the keys that are on the wallet simply grant you access to, as I described it, it's a bit like a PO box. And it's a PO box in a big database, and it just grants you access. So if there is conflict in some way, then you can actually end up in a situation where, as you say, pounds and that could collapse, but you could still access your crypto, providing there's still electricity and networks and that kind of thing. So it does provide a resilience solution because of it being distributed and decentralized. And I was talking to someone else was asking the other day about how do you design systems that are resilient? I said, well, the first thing is you adopt the principles of anti-fragility, which is that you assume that bits are going to be compromised. So you're talking about cyber attacks and that. Well, actually, what you do is you move away from the old-fashioned, for those who worked in IT, they'll be familiar with fortress-based multi-layer defenses. Yeah. So you've got the whole, well, you've got a firewall, you've got your antivirus, you've got levels of access, all this kind of thing. It's all very much perimeter-based. And the problem with perimeter-based security, a bit like a fortress, you can build a big castle, you can build a big wall and a big moat, but if someone digs underneath it or comes in by air with a drone, then your perimeter security is gone. So what you have to do is design it with the expectation that your defenses will be breached and have it kind of like isolated and segmented. That's where decentralized systems become really interesting, because a decentralized crypto network, you can lose, there's my mug says, like blockchain miner, you can lose mining setups all over the place, and it doesn't adversely affect the rest of the network. So it suddenly makes it a very resilient solution. That's my thinking anyway.
Yeah, and if assets are tokenized, so things like, after the wars where everything was bombed out, or you look at Advika now in Ukraine, and they say, oh, they've retreated, the Ukraine's retreated. It's destroyed, it's destroyed. You've got to rebuild that, and who's got the titles, and where's all that in the safe? So if you're tokenized,
And that's where, if you take a look at Estonia, where they've now got they've got their e-registry scheme, which is where people and businesses can register on a block of what's effectively a blockchain. It's not quite a blockchain, but it's like a digital identity management scheme. But they've also linked in things like property ownership, healthcare records, and various other things. What was fascinated by that was that they've adopted it because they're nervous about, as I describe it, the neighbours visiting for the weekend barbecue and then not leaving for a few years. That they've then got an asset register that they can go back to. And what I was really interested by was I discovered that Georgia, which is another former satellite type thing, has also developed apparently a similar scheme. So that they've done a similar thing on the similar basis, that in the event of the neighbours coming around for a barbecue and they bring the tanks with them and they don't go away, and then a few years later you've then got the register. And something that I don't know if anyone else has got more knowledge on this or not, but I heard a while ago, this is one of the problems with property ownership in Berlin, because they quite often get a situation where someone claims that they've got ownership of a property in Berlin. The records prior to World War II of property ownership have been lost. And so they carry the risk that someone says, oh yeah, this is my building, I own it, or my land or whatever. And then someone comes back a few years later and says, oh, no, here's the title deed to show that I actually own that land or something. And apparently that's caused some problems over the years. So if you've now got a land registry effectively that is blockchain and distributed ledger based, which is what I think it was El Salvador was going to be one of the first countries to do that a few years ago, makes it very interesting. So yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah, when you talk about that, Gary, I don't know if you're referring to the story. It's when GPS, when we used to have paper maps to get from A to B, and when GPS came out, they realized when they rebuilt these cities that Britain flattened, killed 1 million people in the war. We don't speak about that much, but we killed 1 million civilians deliberately. We completely flattened cities, and they rebuilt them. But they rebuilt them where they thought they were. And now when the GPS is there, they're not in quite the right place. And so it's, okay, right, we've got to bring in this carte blanche, which says, this is a reset now. This is what is. You can't bring your piece of paper and say you own this block of land and something else has been built on it. So as technology moved, it created problems.
Mm-hmm.
We said, now we had the chat when we were talking about Colombia doing a project with the land registry to get all the land on a blockchain. That was a Ripple XRP project. Saying the problem in England is most of the land, there's not pieces of paper and deeds for it because it was there from 1066.
Mm.
So these people own it, but it's loosely bounded and whatever.
Well, it's interesting. In the UK, land registry only holds title deeds from the point at which the ownership of the land has changed. And an awful lot of land in the UK has never changed ownership. So it's always been with, and some of it is, I think, is it the Duke of Westminster owns a massive amount of London. The churches own major tranches of land, and the Crown certainly owns a lot of land. But in the UK, a lot of land is not actually on the land registry, simply because a family has owned it for hundreds and hundreds of years, and so there's never been title. Yeah. So,
The Doomsday Book was a ledger.
Yeah.
The Doomsday Book was a ledger, and it said what there was and who owned it, so they knew what to tax and who he could give it away to get his barons over. And part of it stayed there since.
Well, it's interesting you're talking about like the unintended consequences with technology and that. This is a non-blockchain story, but I was just thinking about Germany, GPS, and nuclear power stations, and there's an interesting story around that a few years ago. That Germany was obviously concerned about, well, what does it do to protect against a terrorist attack? These nuclear power stations, and so it came up with this bright idea of the nuclear power stations apparently had smoke generators built. And so when they thought there was a threat, they'd throw up smoke generators to create a load of smoke around the power stations until someone said, well, that's a great way of highlighting where your nuclear power stations are. So they thought, maybe not such a clever thing. And besides, GPS was coming in at the time. I think this was in the late 80s, early 90s. And so cleverly enough, they came up with GPS jamming technology, which they put around the nuclear power stations, until they tested them. And then they suddenly realized that a lot of German trucking firms and the autobahns were having auto payment collection systems that were GPS based. And when you suddenly activated the GPS jammers, that threw all the German truckers and these autobahn systems into a mess. And it's like they just hadn't coordinated. So an example of the law of unintended consequences that they thought they were blocking things. So this is where, again, distributed ledgers, decentralization, they provide a lot of potential, but also might introduce new risks that no one's even thought about yet. Hey, Steve, we've just been joined by Zishan. Hey there.
Hey, Gary, how's it going?
Good, thanks. Long time no speak.
Very long time. Hold on. It's not on. Sorry, let me turn that on.
No worries. How's it going? Are you in the UK these days or Dubai?
I am in the UK at the moment. I actually landed a few days ago.
Okay. Yeah. So what's new in your world then? Anything exciting you can share?
Well, I wasn't expecting to be asked as soon as I get in, but what's been going on? So
just turn around the table and you're the last. You've just come at the end of that.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Right.
we're all busy sharing a personal secret, and it's your turn now. So
Got it. Okay. Let me introduce myself for everyone, I suppose. My name's Zishan. I'm a Web3 marketeer. I've been in the industry now since 2013. I run an agency called Yuya, which is a Web3 specialist agency. We've got offices in London, New York, and Dubai. And I help organizations scale and grow fundamentally. And that is, we look at everything from an overarching consultative perspective, me being a consultant, but then I have a team of about 15, 16 people spread throughout the world that specialize in different areas of marketing, whether it's community, PR, press. We do everything along the lines of your traditional marketing as well. So like advertising, we can run ads within a programmatic network. We can do SEO, et cetera, all that sort of boring stuff. Gary knows all of this already because we've been speaking for many years around this sort of stuff. Yeah, lovely to meet you all. I don't know how many people are on here, but I hope I haven't bored anyone.
no, that's always good, and it's always adding pieces of the jigsaw. And we don't actually know what a jigsaw is, where people are involved in all sorts of things. So it's interesting. Earlier on, Kaz was asking, what do we typically talk about on these sessions? And I said, whatever the audience wants to go through. So what are people going? And I know you've got some really interesting experiences, particularly with the Middle East, is what I tend to think about.
There's one brand that I can talk about. They're called Mark Meta Earth. It's not the equivalent of a digital world as such, but if anyone has seen the movie Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds, where people are putting on glasses and they're running around in a virtual world, Mark Meta Earth basically have created that. But right now it's through a phone where you can put marks up in locations. You can buy and sell NFTs within that structure. They've created like an economy within that as well. It's something which we haven't really seen anywhere. It's like an amalgamation of TikTok, Instagram, old school Facebook, combining with Pokemon Go. So you're actually physically in the outside world. So for example, I can be down at, say, London Bridge, and I put something up at London Bridge as a video. And Gary, you, because perhaps me and you are connected, you would see, you know, if you're physically going past London Bridge, your Mark app would ping, be like, hey, Zishan left a market. Do you want to have a look at it, as an example? So it's like a social structure, but takes you outside into the big wide world. And the really big thing that they've really brought in is that there's a really big Web3 element. They've created an entire marketplace and an ecosystem within it. We're currently in talks with Adidas, Nike, and a couple of other organizations, retail organizations, so that when you're actually physically walking around in cities around the world, and if you're a Mark user, you'll get special discounts and offers, early access to certain things, but in the physical world through the digital structure.
That sounds like a bit of a blend between Ready Player One, if anyone's seen that film, which was all about VR and
Yeah.
that kind of. But also, I'm trying to remember the game that I see a lot of people playing, which is a mixture of geotagging and kind of Pokemon Go in the real world, where I see them walking down the high street with a mobile phone and they're trying to get these Tamagotchis or whatever they are. It sounds like a mix of that, but with the commercial market getting involved, as you say, like retailers, advertising, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a really big gaming element within it as well. So I'm trying to get them a partnership with, if anybody knows who's interested to do this, is an esports platform. We've got a tournament organizer as well at the moment, where we can actually sort of try and get some online gaming going for them, where people are going to be in the real world, where you have to physically go to a location to engage in this structure, to play this game, to win the tournament. But yeah, absolutely, Gary, you're right. It's like using your phone, but then engaging with digital assets that are in an augmented reality structure in your space. But these things never disappear. They're on a blockchain, they're on a centralized server as well. So there's a mixture of the two, that is allowing for the system to actually run and function in a way that if you don't want to get involved in the Web3 element, that's okay. You can just stick with the Web2 element and be a social user, for example. You can put your content up. One of the relationships that we're building, or we're trying to build for them, is working with content creators who are artists here in London. It's very much a Gen Z platform where they're like, we want a platform where we can just have people under 25 who are artists and want to put content out. So they've created their own network, but they've got no way to get it out there at the moment. So we're trying to cater that. So as you're running around, you might see artwork, drawings, music, all this sort of stuff that may actually potentially go out as well. So it really is a massive mixture. It's a very interesting project.
And it sounds very much like what I've been seeing gradually developing over the last few years, particularly around NFTs and tokenization of music and art and that. So, sorry, Peter, you were just about to say something.
I might have misheard, but did you mention Tron? Tron.
Me?
Yeah.
I thought you mentioned Tron, actually.
No, I didn't say Tron.
Okay.
Well, I have seen it. I didn't mention it.
I didn't mean the movie Tron, but the crypto Tron. So
no, I didn't mention them. No.
I've not heard anything about in Wade's shoes. I saw something recently. We're talking a bit about Solana before, which I wanted to bring up again. But I thought you mentioned Tron, which I didn't. I bought the first altcoins I bought because I remember the movie Tron, and I thought, like, where this is coming from. Let's buy this. It was cheap at the time. Let's see where it goes. It went up, came down, and I thought, maybe there's an application coming out. But
because Tron was going to be very much around gaming, wasn't it? If I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yeah. There was something pushed. It was in the was it the Box Crypto Hub Facebook group or something else? But it was about Solana, and I didn't realize, and it was Solana Mobile. What's this? But it seems to be a phone that houses Solana, and then you collect. So I guess it's NFTs from different games, and all your different games, you can keep them on one, basically a hard wallet, like the new Ledger that looks like a phone. So okay, what are all? I don't play. I've never played any games on the computer. I don't have any NFTs. But it's what else does it hold? Does it hold other assets too? But it was a Solana Mobile. I thought, what the hell?
So was that a mobile to do crypto mining of Solana then?
No, it was this is a phone and you can get your NFTs on it. What I understood, and I think where it was on the forum, I said, I've got no idea what this is. And
Okay.
he did an explanation, which left me, I've still got no idea what it is. So I Googled it and went looking, and then I found, oh, it's a phone. There's these phones for sale, but it's a Solana phone, and it's just geared up to holding Solana tokens and maybe other tokens. So the new ledger that came out, it looks like a mobile phone, it looks like an iPhone. So is this a physical cold? Is it a cold wallet? It can collect things in, and how do you do it? And does it work as a phone? I'd like to get away from Apple and Google. I'd really like to get a Starlink phone, which are coming about now. But so it was the Solana, and I thought we were talking about the outages earlier, but it looks like that's becoming pervasive across games. But I'm not in that world. I don't see them. Where you can buy things, to use, a new sword or whatever in Dungeons and Dragons, and you've got to pay something, some kind of crypto for that, basically an NFT, and you can take it with you and take it off.
Well, that's the whole thing, isn't it? I've been talking about this for a while, about the ability to take like your Roblox avatar and take it into Minecraft or whatever. This whole idea that suddenly your digital asset, whether it's an avatar or a sword or clothes or whatever, and you can transfer it across game platforms. But in order to do that, you need the kind of interoperability layer. You need the ability for Roblox to be able to interpret a Minecraft avatar or whatever type thing. And I guess when you look at what goes on in what I describe as the grown-up world for a minute of traditional IT, we do that through APIs, we do that through data standardization, and we still don't get it right. I've spent pretty much an entire career loving it when I hear the word seamless system integration. Because those three words usually mean it's going to overrun, it's going to be expensive, and it's not going to work. And then you hear the new one now is about API interoperability, and we're beginning to see some stuff. This is where Web3 is interesting because it's tackling the problem of interoperability differently. So for those who might be aware what an API is, an application programming interface, it's the ability to get one computer program to go and talk to a database or an application in a way that they'll talk to each other, kind of peer-to-peer. The interesting thing with Web3 is that you're actually going through an interoperability layer, which is a blockchain or something. So it might be Ethereum based or whatever. And I don't know, Kaz, I mean, this is probably more your domain. Is that roughly right in terms of Web3 and using Ethereum as an interoperability layer?
Well, you have to understand. First, we begin with Ethereum, the EVM. It is a common language and a common architecture, but like these chains are kind of still independent to each other, so they run on completely different. So Ethereum layer 1 is definitely a different chain to AVAX, which is a layer 1, but still the EVM, and how they move assets from chain to chain at the moment is through bridges. But bridges has been highly insecure. I think it's getting better. So then you have like so you have like ecosystems like Polkadot and Cosmos and AVAX. They try to create one layer, but it has several subnets around it. So they're still interoperable. They can talk and be interoperable with each other, but on the base chain, on a common base chain. Whereas that Ethereum doesn't have that. The layer twos are still kind of like separate chains, but they get their security from Ethereum. So what they will do, the layer twos like Optimism and Arbitrum, they will run their own transactions. They will run transactions on their chain, but assemble those transactions and compress it, and then put those transactions on the blockchain, on the L1 Ethereum chain. So they're not interoperable like that, very easily. They still have to go through bridges and stuff like that. So you have like and then you, so then you have like a Chainlink. What they're doing is they have a system called CCIP, which is Chainlink cross-chain interoperability layer, and but that is not necessarily don't think it supports NFTs at the moment. But what you can do with that is you're able to send assets like coins from one EVM chain to the other. And how they do that, they have like nodes on each chain, on each EVM chain. So once you send tokens to an address, you specify which chain, you specify which node on that chain that you want to send the tokens to, and it will either lock the tokens on the original chain and mint it on the destination chain, or it will either burn the tokens on the origin chain, and then mint the tokens on the destination chain. So it's not it's not kind of like very easy to kind of seamlessly move assets from one chain to another, because they're still separate separate networks. So I tend to think of blockchains like intranets and internets, right? So each chain is their own intranet that then has has sort of like connected to the general internet. So yeah. It's very difficult for games to seamlessly move a character from one chain to the other. But having said that, you do have the data structure, like you alluded to, Gary. You still have the data structure that is the original NFT that could kind of like be locked and then minted on the destination chain as well. But again, is how that dApp or that game sort of like interprets that data and what graphics you get with it and stuff like that. Yeah.
And I guess that's where I find it fascinating. I keep saying it's a bit like the VHS and Betamax wars many years ago about which blockchain's going to win and this kind of thing. That actually it's the interoperability that matters. I still say if you go back to the days where you had VHS, Betamax, Philips 2000, the actual winner was whoever it was who designed the SCART sockets on the back of the TV. That meant you could plug any of them in. And this is where, when you look at interoperability layers, as you mentioned, that AVAX, Chainlink, Polkadot, Cosmos, I think they're the ones that are really fascinating because they provide the interoperability between these networks or blockchains or whatever. Because you're right. Again, you got this thing. If you think about, let's talk about Bitcoin, for example, the Bitcoin blockchain. The whole principle behind that was the ability to transfer value peer-to-peer without an intermediary. And by transfer, we mean not copy, but actually move. So the ownership goes from here to here. And you've not got this double spend or anything like that. So you don't have the risk of two people potentially claiming ownership of the same asset. Now, if it's all on the one blockchain, you can do that. As soon as you introduce multiple blockchains, you need to retain this ability that when it leaves one blockchain, then it goes onto the blockchain, but is deleted, in effect, from the original blockchain, which is where you're mentioning things like burning and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's fascinating stuff. I don't know, Zeesh, do you tend to stick on the marketing side, or you get involved in the more technical side of things of these?
I've always been very much on the marketing side, although I do understand what you guys are talking about. I'm not technical enough to sort of weigh in on which one's right and which one's wrong. I have a personal opinion.
Yeah, I still think we're evolving and we're learning.
I don't think there's a right or wrong. It's just I think someone says we're very, very early with this technology, and to the end user, it really the underlying chain really shouldn't matter. Like, we're using the internet now, and if I don't know if I tell everyone here that every day you use TCP/IP, you're like, what? But every day you use it, but you have no idea what it is. You have no idea what SMTP is or POP is, but we use it every time we send an email, right? So it's not about the underlying to the end user, and for adoption, it's not about what happens under the covers. It's about the application and the real world use of that application. I think that's what matters.
I actually would second that. I say exactly the same thing. When it comes to conversations, it's all, and it's email is actually the example that I always use, to the point of one email system talks to another email because they send the same structure out. I say exactly the same thing. And as a marketeer, I always come in and I speak to, actually almost all people I speak to are techies. And it's like, you need to simplify what you're doing. You need to make it really easy for a kid to come in and be like, I understand this, I understand these dots, because people are lazy, and frankly, no disrespect on your own, people are stupid. And now with the way technology is actually moving, the simplicity of tech, the simplicity of interaction with digital assets, and I don't mean digital assets in terms of an NFT, but anything digital, is the simplicity of it is what's its volume, which then becomes something that people can monetize later on. So the more complicated a structure is, the less likely it is that it's going to get mass reach. There'll be a niche environment. People in this call, for example, who are in the industry, who work within the industry, they can speak a certain language and they can get it. But if my girlfriend was sitting here, she'd be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And she's a dentist. She's very, very smart, runs her own practice, but she'd be like, don't get it, don't know what you're talking about.
This is where I'm sure a number of groups I'm involved in will always say that they're having conversations about the need for education. And I say, yes, I agree, we need to educate people, but currently we're educating the wrong people. We shouldn't need to educate the public about crypto. We should be educating crypto people to make it so simple that they don't need to know how it works. They just use it. It makes it far, far simpler that way. So definitely on that. So
yeah, I don't think we can actually educate people on these things anyway. I don't think realistically, I don't think it can be done.
No, I get it. It's kind of funny. I had a conversation with someone a while ago where she said, I'm not getting into crypto because I don't understand how it works. It's like, well, do you understand how a bank account works? Because in all probability, if I start asking you about Nostro and Vostro accounts and the Swift network and what ISO 20022 message formats are, you're probably going to give me a bit of a blank stare. But you know how to make a payment. You know how to pay your bills, and that's the way it should be. So that's definitely
as far as it goes, isn't it?
Exactly right. So right. Well, we're about out of time, I'm afraid, folks. We've had an interesting hour of rambling around all over the place, but we've covered all sorts of interesting stuff, whether it be some stuff about the programmability aspect or CBDCs or geopolitical stuff and NFTs and everything. So thanks everyone for coming along. Been really interesting conversation. Good to see some familiar faces and some new ones as well. I hope you've all enjoyed it. I hope it was of interest to you. Do come again. See you all next week and have a great day.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks,
Bye.